few basic things I wanted to initially make it clear. Then we will move on to sharing my screen and then showing those small things. So few things I'm suddenly jumping into it. One is that we will try to use bit of PHP code. You don't have to worry about not able to understand PHP or sort of things. Forget about all those things. Assume that there are certain built-in functions what I'm using. But the idea of having different databases and different tables we will try to analyze first. Okay. So don't worry too much about the environment in which we are working. We will slowly learn that one by one. So the first thing what we will try to understand is that there are three different levels I'm going to talk about now. One is the end user, other one is a programmer, and the third one is a database administrator. Okay. So in the first two cases, what we explained, that is two different databases in the same server, or two different databases situated on two different machines, writing an application program to fetch data from these things and then provide it to an end user. In all these cases, the end user is not aware about whether you have single database or multiple database, whether it is a distributed database and other things. So the end user is completely transparent of these things. Whereas the other two sets of people, database administrator and programmer, will be aware about these things. When it comes to a distributed database, I'm leaving out one more layer of people, that is the programmer. Programmer will write as if he is going to fetch from a centralized database. Okay, he will know only about the database name, table name, and field names. The database administrator will make sure that this data is spread across multiple different servers, physically located, or I can call it as rather sites where different tables and different databases are holding those data. Okay, so that is the difference. So first part we will try to see now. So to explain that, what I'm going to do is for time issues, I couldn't have Oracle installed in my machines. What I had is MySQL. It's the same similar relational DBMS package it is. The only thing is Oracle is a proprietary one. You need to have a license for that, all those things. But for us, on the other hand, MySQL, what we are having is a open source product. You can use it, customize it, and work with it. So for testing and debugging purposes, we use this. But at the same time, you can have a very large database running, very large database applications running on this, because the entire AUMS is running on top of MySQL database. Okay, so such kind of a open source product. So what I have is this interface. This is a client-side interface called SQL Yog, which is basically the client-side interface or GUI interface for MySQL database. So I have installed MySQL database in this machine, and then I created a database called test1. I hope, oh sorry, I didn't share my screen. Okay, hope you are able to see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this interface is called SQL Yog interface. This is the web interface for the what you call MySQL database what I have installed. Like how you have worked with Oracle. Oracle, you have a interface wherein you can type your query and other things, see the database tables visually and other things. So the graphical user interface you had. Something similar to that is what I have done it. So I have a MySQL database running in this machine, and this particular interface will give me an idea that what all databases are there, what all tables are there. So these snippets, disk kept one on top of the other, is an example. I mean, like indicating it is a database. So I have basically 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 databases I have in my MySQL database running here. When I say database, it's basically consisting of a collection of tables. So now in my test1 database, I have a table called employee. Okay, the employee table is open here. I have two fields, employee ID and employee name. And then similar way, so this is one of my database. Okay, I can create one more database here. I'm calling it as test2. I created one more database, and then I'm creating a table. I'm saying table name is employee again. The first field I am keeping as employee ID only. The second field I'm keeping as employee salary. So I created. Now this is my table. When I click open on that, I will be able to see the table in an Excel kind of structure, and I can fill in those data. 01, I'm saying say 15,000, and saving it. So now if you see, I have two databases, separate databases I'm talking about, not tables. Okay, there is an employee table which belongs to test1 database, and there is another employee table which belongs to test2. Now, employee 1 contains ID and name, employee 2 contains ID and salary. Okay, so two different databases. Now, I wanted to fetch information from these. Probably, this is what kind of a distribution? Is it vertical split or horizontal split? Students?
Vertical split.
Okay, okay. Uh, so what we have done is table, we have certain fields we kept in one place, certain fields we have kept in another place. For our ease of use, we have kept employee ID in both places so that we can combine them easily. Okay, so it is a vertical split between two different tables from two different databases. Now, what I really require is I wanted to have employee ID, employee name, and their corresponding salary. Okay, so the same way how you run your query from I mean like you to retrieving data from multiple tables, same way we can think of writing the query. Okay, so the only thing what extra you need to mention is till now you were not talking about the database from which you are accessing it. Why? Because your client side was always connected to single database running on your database server. But now I have two databases, test1 as well as test2. Okay, so first thing is whenever I mean you have done a project in fifth semester DBMS lab, right? So when you are using a database in your project, whatever the front end you have used, what was the first step you have done in your application before starting, before using anything? What was the first part you have done with respect to the database access in your code? What you have done? Guys, you have explained it to me very properly during the presentations of the project. Most of the teams have done really good job during those projects. You've forgotten everything within one semester.
So check if the user has access to that data.
To access the data, I need to connect to the database, right? From my application, I have written codes to connect to the database, right? Have we done that? Students?
Yes, sir.
I mean, you need to establish a backend connection, right? Like to the database, you need to connect. From your application is one process running on your machine. Your database is another process running on your machine. You need to write a code which will create a connection between these two processes, right?
Backend to frontend.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So same way, I'll you're able to see this.
Yes, sir.
I'll explain it what exactly these statements are. Don't worry about the syntax part right now. because the concept remains the same across any package what you are using, language what you are using. Okay, so I need to specify a few things to create a connection. I mean, this is very specific to what you call PHP and MySQL, PHP as the front end and MySQL as my database. Okay, somewhat similar operations I am going to perform with respect to any other database. I need to specify what is the host, what is the username, what is the password, what is the database name, and then creating a connection. So in the host, I'll be mentioning where this particular database is. So this will specify whether I am running this database in same machine or some other machine. Okay. So I can provide an IP address here, an IP address which is in the same network. Okay. So that is one thing. Suppose if you are accessing a database across internet, then you will be providing a URL of that particular database server. Suppose if you have an online database server which you are trying to access. So then in that case, you can provide that URL there. The second parameter what I require is how to access that database. So when you log into your database in Oracle, you're providing a username and password, right? So that username is what here. And then I need to have a password. So I am providing a password here, some random, I mean like some password I have used for my local machine. And then what is the database I'm trying to connect to it? So in this case, I had two databases like test1 and test2. So I wanted to say that this particular connection I'm establishing is to connect to the first database. Okay, test1. So that is, I'm saying that. And then say MySQL has a function called MySQL_connect, which will pass all these parameters to establish a connection. To which server, what is the username, what is the password, and then this is establishing a connection. Okay, or die MySQL error and all is just like saying that if connection is not established, then you will terminate that operation. And then once you establish a connection, there is a function called MySQL select DB, which will say for this particular connection, which DB needs to be used. Okay. So understand the steps. First one is defining your host, which server it is having. And the second one is username. Third one is password, then the database. Okay. So at this step, when I'm trying to establish a connection, I'm trying to establish a connection to a server. So the details what I'm passing is server name or server IP, username and password to connect to that. Okay. Once I establish a connection, I need to select out of the multiple databases available in this server, which particular database I wanted to connect. So in our example, we are connecting to test1. After this, it is quite usual SQL queries you can write. Okay. I can write select from employee and so on, whatever. Okay. Now, here there is nothing to have a confusion because when I say employee, I am only connected to test1 database. And inside test1, there is only one function, sorry, one table called employee. So there is no ambiguity here. So my query will remain simple like this. Okay. Suppose now I wanted to have a scenario where I have two databases are there, test1 and test2. So the question is, how will you establish connection in that case? So look into this code again. Are we talking about connection specific to any database? Are we having connection mechanism or the connection function MySQL_connect? Is it talk about the database to which you are connecting? Students, answer me.
No, sir.
No, sir.
It is purely with respect to the server. To that server, you are establishing a connection. Okay. So in that case, with this statement, I have established a connection to the local database server which is running on my machine. Now, this particular function said the database what I'm going to use is DB1, which is test1. Okay. Suppose if I have repeated that statement like this, and then I say DB2, what it will be what is the meaning of it? Say I'm not having this statement, rather I'm having the second statement only is done. What is the meaning of it? For the connection you have established, you are going to use DB2 as the database. Okay. So my question is, will I be able to establish connection and then select both the databases for my purposes by doing this way? Logically, will this be possible?
No, sir.
The first statement will say select DB1. So the MySQL platform will understand that for this connection, first database is what you are supposed to use. Okay, test1. Immediately the next statement says MySQL select DB, and DB2 you are supposed to use for the connection 1. So what happens is connection 1's tie up with test1 database is overwritten by connection 1's connectivity with test2 database. So now at present, what is the connection setup? It is to test2. So now if I have written select star from employee, this employee table belongs to test1 or test2?
Test1.
Test2. Why? Because this particular statement has created an attachment between connection 1 and test2 database. Okay. So now problem is I wanted to have both these databases open. So what is the solution?
So
What way
DB
we can
host
solve it?
2.
Pardon me?
DB host 2. We have to use another server IP address.
Okay, now that you are talking about having another database in another machine. I'm not having another machine, rather in the same local host only I'm having one more server. So the immediate operations what I can think about is establishing one more connection. I will say DB2 and test2. Okay. Then I will create one more connection. Now I hope you are familiar with the concept called file handler. What is a file handler? You have done in your C programming, where you, if you want to work with a file, you will use fopen something like name of the file and then some more you will give, right? Do you remember those things?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so what you meant by file handler then? This we have discussed in operating system also. What exactly a file handler does then? It is a logical resource which creates a connection between, say, two different processes or two different resources. In the case of file handler, that handler was creating a connection between your program and the file which is stored in the secondary storage. Suppose if you say a.txt is the file you wanted to open, the file pointer, whatever we create, is a logical resource which establishes a connection between your program and the file a.txt. Okay, same way, in case of database applications, a similar concept is there called database handler. So what happens is these parameters, these are basically variables. In case of PHP, these are variables. Okay, so the variable connection 1 and connection 2 are nothing but those handlers which will establish a connection between the database, what you are mentioning, and your front-end program. So now I created two such handlers. My first handler is a connection to database which is hosted in a machine called 127.0.0.1. That is the local host machine. Okay. I'm creating one more connection with the same database, same machine, not the database, same machine, same server, I can say. Okay, this is quite possible. Both these variables, I mean, it is like two pointers pointing to the same address location. Somewhat similar to that is what you can understand with respect to connection 1 and connection 2. Both are database handlers. Both handlers are creating an attachment or a connection between the database server hosted in 127.0.0.1 with your front-end application. Okay, so now what happens is I created two connections, connection 1 and connection 2. So for connection 1, I mentioned that the database needs to be used is DB1. For connection 2, the database needs to be used is DB2. So now this problem is solved because now I have two connections established and two databases are connected to it. So which means that through these lines, these many lines, I have established two paths. One path goes to database 1, which is test 1, and the second one goes to database 2, which is test 2. Okay. Now, if I write select star from employee, there is going to be a problem. Why? Because in both test 1 and test 2, I have employee table. So there will be ambiguity. Which employee table I need to fetch? So a solution to that is I need to mention the database name. Test1.employee when I say very clear. How you have solved this problem of field names, same field names from two different tables. The same way we are going to solve this. There what you have done is table name dot field name. Suppose if employee name was the field name in the first table and employee name is the same field name available in second table. To avoid the ambiguity, we said table1.employee name and table2.employee name. Same concept we will use to select different databases and different tables. So select star from test1.employee. There is no ambiguity in it. Employee table belongs to test1 database. That is what you are referring there. Okay. So now if I say test2.employee, no ambiguity in that. The employee table which belongs to test2 database is what I'm going to refer. So I can now say, for example, if I wanted to just retrieve name and salary, name comes from one table, salary comes from another table. Okay, so in that case, how will I write my statement? Select test1 dot employee dot emp name as name, comma, test2 dot employee dot emp sal as SAL from test1 dot employee, comma, test2 dot employee. Okay. What this statement does is it says that from first database test1, from the table employee, select employee name. So for ease of use, I'm saying that this whole thing can be referred as name in the later stage. Same way, from second table test2, sorry, second database test2, from the employee table, pick the field values employee salary, and then this will be later onwards referred as SAL. These information I have to fetch from two databases, test1.employee and test2.employee. Okay, this will give me informations as first one will give me, that is test1.employee.emp name will give me two names, what is available. Say I just have filled in from this is my test1 database employee table. It has employee ID and EMP name. So Rajesh M and Srividya B. Two names are there. These two names will be fetched. If you come to test 2 and employee table, there I have got employee ID and EMP salary. And EMP SAL I'm picking, I will get these two values. Okay. Now these two information I'm getting that as like two records, because there are equal number of records available in both these tables. So both these tables, when I combine, I get two rows. First row saying that Rajesh M and a salary value, and Srividya B a salary value from the second table. Okay, so that combination is what I'm going to get from this particular query execution. Okay, I can write the remaining code to print that value. It will display the value back to the user. Okay. 1 second. Few modifications I'm doing. I need to execute this. So what I have done is the query which I wanted to execute, I converted them into a string and then stored into a variable. And then I have passed that to a function called MySQL_query. These are specifically related to PHP and MySQL. Don't worry too much about it, about these steps. This will execute the query what you have written here. So this was the query which needs to be executed. This statement will execute that query. Okay. And the resulting answers, the result of this query execution will be stored into results. Okay. Now, this results from this table, what we have explained here, I said the results are going to be two records. The first record, first field is the name field coming from table, test1.employee table, and then corresponding salary value in the second column is coming from test2.employee table. Okay, so it is two records, or I can say two rows. So I wanted to fetch row by row and then print it. So I said by MySQL_fetch array will fetch one by one row from your results. And I'm saying field 1 instead of field 1. I will say what was the tag of that this whole thing. I said later this can be mentioned as just name. Okay, same way the second field was test2.employee.emp_sal and I renamed that as SAL. So I will put that here. Okay, so what happens is this statement will print until I have all my records available in the results what I have fetched. Thing like this. I had two rows. So I'm fetching one by one row. When it is null, it will come out of the loop. That means the third time when the loop executes, it will get a null value and it will terminate and then go out. So I just fetched first row, first row's first field value, that is whatever comes under name, that has been printed, dot, a vertical line to separate it. Then first row second field, that is called as salary, from which is obtained from the second database table called employee. Okay. So this information, I will be able to get it printed when I'm executing this PHP code. Okay. Now the next question is, how will I execute this PHP code? This is a PHP program which I have written. How will I execute it? And this is supposed to be an application. That means it should look like a web application. So how will I run my web application in such kind of platform? Okay. What I have used is, many of you people are already familiar with the name called XAMPP, XAMPP, or its other version called WAMP. You might have used for your 5th semester database projects. So this basically is a development platform which has multiple things in it. So a XAMPP contains a web server called Apache, a database server, MySQL, a file server, a document server, and one more version of web server, okay, for different purposes. So the PHP kind of programs can easily run on Apache web server with the support of MySQL database. So these two is what I require in this whole setup. That is the web server Apache and a database server MySQL. Remaining things will not bother right now. So these two should have been running in your machine, running in your platform. Then only you will be able to access the PHP file from somewhere else, as well as you will be able to access the database server which is running in this machine. Okay, so I'm trying to make sure that these two are running in this machine. And then I have written a PHP code, right? This code should go into a specific location. These are some basic steps with respect to XAMPP web server. So it is installed in the C drive. There is a folder called htdocs. That is the documents which I need to deploy will be stored into that location. Here I have created a folder called my app. Okay. Remaining all things are available in the by default available in that folder, exam htdocs folder. I created a folder called my app. Into that, I'll copy and paste this PHP file. Okay. So now I have set up everything. I have two database servers situated in the same machine. Situated in the same machine. Both has employee tables, and the table has got a vertical distributed data available in it. In one you have employee ID and name. The other one I have employee ID and salary. And I created connections from my application, PHP application, which is running in my machine. Two connections I created to that database server, and I am connecting to two different databases. Both databases has got the same employee table. So I have written a query which can fetch data from first table as well as second table, and then finally printing the results. Okay. So to execute that, I need to run that PHP. I need to start my Apache web server and MySQL server, and then I need to just go to the web page. I just say www. Sorry, since I'm running my web server is in the same machine. I'm saying localhost / my app, and show me an error because my MySQL server is not yet started. Otherwise, you will see those two records values here. I'm trying to start it, showing me some different errors. It's MySQL shutdown unexpectedly, it is saying, but I should be able to sort it. Okay. So forget about that small logistical part. What I want you to understand is how I have sorted out having data stored in two different tables in a distributed fashion. Okay, so here what I have done is created two handlers to connect to that databases, and then established it. Now from here, migration into the second case is quite easy. What should I do for the next case? if I have these two databases located in two different database servers stored in or running in two different machines, what should be the change? Only one change is required here. What should be that change? Students?
We have to give one more DB host 2
Yes.
and we have to connect it to that.
Yeah. Here both the connections are to the same database host because both my databases are in the same machine. So scaling it to the next level is quite easy. I should have one more database host, say DB host 2, and with a new IP series. And then my first connection will be to DB host 1. Second connection will be to DB host 2. Okay. Then selecting databases also will go like that. Or if you, yeah, that will go fine. And then, do I need to include anything else here now? Modify my query. Now, when you say for example, both places has the same database. Okay. Now here I have test1 database. Okay. I have remotely taken one of my server here. And I have a MySQL database running there also. And I have test2 database here. So which means here also I have a test2 and here also I have a test2 database. Suppose if I need to fetch information from these two databases. Okay, so understand the situation. My first server has test2 database. Name of the table is employee. Second server also hosts test2 database and it has a table called employee. So obviously here you will have ambiguity because you will say test2.employee, test2.employee. It will not work because this is ambiguity creating here. Test2.employee EMP name. First of all, EMP name is not there in test2 for this. It is probably there in the remote server, the other machine. So I need to modify saying that this belongs to DB host 1, DB host 1, test2 employee, and this belongs to DB host 2 dot test2 dot employee. Okay. Now, while talking about distributed databases, three different distribution transparencies are discussed. If I'm mentioning all these details, it comes into which category of transparency? Three different database transparencies are discussed. What are those three different distribution transparencies? Students?
So local, fragment, and location.
Local mapping.
Location mapping and fragment mapping.
So this comes to into what? The lowest level of transparency, right? Where you need to know which site it belongs, which database it belongs, which table it belongs, and what is the field name. Then only you are able to extract the data. Okay, so this is an example of a distributed database concept where it shows local mapping distribution transparency. Okay. Now, few things I want you to do is I want you to try executing this, but for that you need to have little setup required there. Okay. So what I will suggest is I think few of you have already familiar with this platform of exam. That is one reason what I have chosen, because at least 6 or 7 people I remember showing using the exam exam platform for their database project. So if that platform is still available, you can use that. Otherwise, just download from internet, XAMPP, whatever the latest version available. I think version 3.3.0 is available right now for Windows 10. Download that. That will download and install MySQL server also into your machine. then you will get a control panel like this. Start the services of Apache and MySQL in your machine, and then you will be able to run this codes. So I'm sure this code you might have noted it. Otherwise, please make a note of this. I mean, rather than just noting it down, try to understand what we have done it. Two scenarios we have discussed. One in which a server is having two databases and I'm connecting to that. The second one is uh, two different databases, that is two different database servers with IP addresses and connecting to them and then fetching the data and printing it. Okay. So I want you to try this. So I will take up, I will save this file and I'll take up another file and then we'll write down the steps. Easy. So first thing what I wanted to do is develop PHP code. Is step 1. I'll put it steps, we will put it later. So because I need to first download MPP. When you say configure, don't worry. Just I'm selecting these two in my control panel and then starting those services. Configure MPP. Download SQL log. Create this in server. Using log. After that, it tables, populate data. And the next step is develop the PHP code into all databases, fetching some data from different tables of different databases. Okay, so these are the steps you have to do. This part. Okay, the code is available. I'll share that in this connection. You need to try this. That will first give you an idea about how to start off with the MySQL database. I mean, sorry, distributed database concepts. Okay. Now, why we do this way? Because rather than just executing a query, because uh, developing an application and then using a distributed database for that only will clearly give you an idea, because that will give you new different challenges compared to the one what we can talk about by just implementing a distributed database. Okay, why? Because when I have to write a query to fetch the data, that time I have to think too differently for distributing the data. Where exactly keeping my data will be a best way to do that, I'll be able to figure out only when I develop an application to fetch the data and then display it. Okay, so that's why I thought it will be easy for you to start off with this, because this part you have already done somewhat similar in your DB project. So we will start from there, and the only change what we are going to do is, instead of single database and a centralized database architecture, we'll go with a multiple database structure or a distributed database structure. So once we are familiar with this, the next step will be, right now I am writing my code, understanding that there are two different databases. Okay. Now this part, after installing and configuring XAMPP and creating databases, what I can do is I can bring in one more layer here. Okay. At this place. So I'm calling it as 4.1, where I create a distributed applications. What is exactly this is, in my relational DBMS packages, I have an options to configure whether I need to have a communication with any other distributed database servers running remotely. Okay. In Oracle, we call a file called DNS names.ora. So this file is the one which is the configuration file in case of Oracle. In case of MySQL, it is mysql.ini. These are configuration files. Now, what exactly this configuration file is going to do is, it will tell whether you are going to access your local database alone, or you are going to access a remote database, or you are going to have a collection of databases talking to each other. Okay. This, say right now, MySQL and Oracle talking to each other is right now not possible at this point of time with these kind of databases. Okay, there are different database products which can do that. I mean, I need to install one more layer of applications, and then with that help of that, we can talk Oracle and MySQL talking to each other. Right now, we will try out two Oracle servers talking to each other, or two MySQL server talking to each other. Okay, so that will be the next step we will be explaining in the next class. Okay, so I want you to try out this. Okay, so the next level of these things, like communicating with multiple servers, we will talk tomorrow. But today, I'm winding up at this level of giving you a platform to download, install, and then try out with this thing what we have just now discussed. Okay, so this particular steps as well as the PHP code, I will share it now immediately after this session, and then you can try out and then tell me how exactly it is happening with you. Tomorrow we will move to the next level, two MySQL servers talking to each other. Okay.
Where students? Students?
None.
Thank you, ma'am and sir.
I have shared the PHP code and the steps, what you are supposed to follow in this chat itself. You can look into that and then work on it. Any queries, you send a message to ma'am. We'll try to address that so that you can proceed further. Okay then. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.